Hi everyone, how's it going? Good? All right, well, I'm in the post-lunch slump right before you get caffeine at the coffee break after this, so, ideal spot when you're a speaker to be speaking at. But we'll keep you all awake, I promise. So, my name's Renu Sachdeva. I'm the head of Client Solutions for the Americas here at Talking Talent. Really excited to be here with you all today to talk about how we can reimagine DE&I and belonging for everyone. Before I get into it though, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge where we are today. So we're here on Botham Jean Boulevard. I actually was Beau's D&I leader many years ago when he was killed by an off-duty police officer. And it was very poignant for me to come here to see the street name. I haven't been back to Dallas since the pandemic started. So I just wanted to say that because Beau is a huge part of why this work continues to be so important to me today. And it's a reminder of why we have to stay committed and strong in doing this work despite the headwinds that we have been facing in recent times around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And those headwinds are really real. So here's some headlines that you all have probably seen, especially the infamous one of DEI must die. How many of y'all have seen that already? Some of y'all? Okay. So there's a lot out there, and we know that the media tends to sensationalize things, that things kind of get blown out of proportion. And at the same time, there's some truth behind these. In working with our clients, we are hearing how clients are having to get creative around how they do this work in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action. We are hearing about budgets being cut, about there being more resistance of questioning why? Why do we need D&I initiatives? Why do we need a chief diversity officer? Why should we invest more time, resources, energy in this work? I'd love to see a quick show of hands. How many of you all have experienced resistance in some form in your organizations recently around this work? All right, that's almost, I don't know, you can't see everybody, but that is almost all of you who have said that, right? So the resistance is real. And at the same time, this work is more important than ever. 94% of people in a survey said that it is very or somewhat important to them to feel a sense of belonging in the workplace. And yet 75% have said that they felt excluded in some way. When McKinsey did a study, they found that a lack of belonging was one of the top 3 reasons that someone chose to leave their job, with 51% saying it was the number 1 reason. So the numbers are there, the stats are real. We all know how important belonging is, and for people to feel that when they walk into work, whether it's in their virtual home office or in their brick and mortar office that they're walking into. So I'd like you to just take a moment for reflection. The stats are the numbers, they're up on the screen, but I want to invite you all to take a moment and think about what belonging means to you. So just think back in your life, whether professionally or personally, and think about a time when you felt like you really belonged. And just feel that feeling. And then think about a word or a phrase that encapsulates what that felt like for you. And now as you think about that, I'm going to invite you, this is an experiment as a facilitator because I'm about to give up control of the room. I am going to invite you to turn to somebody next to you, ideally meet someone new who you haven't met before, and I just want you to share with each other what that word or phrase or feeling was that came up for you when you thought about what it felt like for you to really belong. We're going to take about 30 seconds, and I am going to ask you all to come back when I call you back to the front of the room, all right? All right, go. All right, y'all. Bring it back. Bring it back. All right, I know it's so hard in a room this size, right? And y'all just want to talk to each other versus listening to people all day. So now we're going to try to see if I can hear y'all. So I'm going to ask you to just shout out some words that came up. I may ask the people in the front to be allies and amplify the voices of the folks behind if I can't hear. But just throw some words at me. What came up for y'all around belonging? Inclusion, family, community, safety, belief. Belief or relief? Relief, okay. Being seen, feeling seen. Comfort. These are such powerful words. Can y'all feel the emotion behind these words that you're sharing? This is real. Belonging is one of the most basic human needs that we all have. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which has been around for decades, it is the single most important need that comes right after our physical needs, is the need for connection and belonging. That's how important it is. But then what gets in the way? Why are workplaces struggling with this so much to this day? So I want to invite you all to take a look back at the trajectory of this field that we call diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. For most organizations, where this work started is with the work around diversity. And what I mean by that is diversifying our workforces, looking at the demographics of our organizations, looking at the numbers and saying, okay, how diverse is our employee group? How diverse is our leadership team? How diverse is our board? And then companies went in and put targets and goals to try to close some of those gaps. They went out to try to hire externally to try to close some of those gaps because guess what? When they looked at the numbers, they didn't always look great, regardless of what dimension of diversity they were looking at. And typically in the beginning, it was around gender and ethnicity. So the work came in around the diversity piece. And then as we were looking at the numbers, we kind of expanded into equity. The conversation about pay equity really got going, closing the pay gap around gender in particular, looking at promotion opportunities. Are we advancing people internally equitably? And then almost as an afterthought in some ways, in many cases, came inclusion and belonging. It's not that we weren't focused on it, but it's really hard to measure. And usually leaders like things they can measure. So the work around inclusion and belonging really felt more nebulous and therefore got less attention in a lot of ways. So the theory that I would like to put forth before you all is because we have gone in this order historically, this is actually one of the major root causes of the resistance, the headwinds that we are experiencing today. Because what happened is with this focus around targets and goals and trying to close some of this gap, is it started to create a zero-sum mindset for those who were in more traditionally well-represented groups. This idea that, okay, if we're going to try to promote more people and hire more people who belong to underrepresented groups, then all of a sudden that means there's fewer positions for me. There's fewer promotion opportunities for me. And so it almost created this unconscious, in most cases, us versus them mentality, where I have heard people say, D&I is great, I support it, as long as it doesn't negatively impact me. And that is the root of so much of this resistance that we are experiencing. So we at Talking Talent want to propose a new way to move forward. And this is based on research that we have done, as well as the work that we do with our clients. And what that is to start with inclusion and belonging. It's to start with a focus on the culture. Because remember, it's one of our most basic human needs. So this is something that everyone can get behind. Because I can tell you there's probably very few people who would say, I don't want to come work in a place where, people don't feel a sense of belonging. This is something we can agree on, that we want to create environments where people can feel like they are included and they belong. And if we can get this right, if we can put our focus and attention here, then the other two will follow. We are going to attract more people of diverse backgrounds to organizations where we have created a culture of inclusion and belonging. And we are more likely to have fair decision making when we have that culture in place. That doesn't mean we can take diversity and equity for granted, though, and we just lose the focus, we just work on the culture and we forget about the numbers. I was actually talking with a client the other day, and they were so excited because they got their pulse survey, their engagement survey scores back, and they said, our inclusion scores are the highest they've ever been. We're just so excited about that. And then almost as an afterthought, they said, well, our workforce is fairly homogenous at the moment, but, we're really excited about those inclusion scores. And I said, very gently, that's great. I'm really happy that your scores are high. And keep in mind that it's much easier to have high inclusion scores when you have a homogenous workforce. The trick is to keep those scores high while you build a more diverse workforce. So we can't lose that intentional focus or just assume it's going to happen, but what we are proposing is that we put way more focus and attention on creating that culture of inclusion and belonging. And so how do we do that? At Talking Talent, we have two key beliefs. One, that DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, is for everyone. And two, to fix DEIB, you have to fix the culture. So how do we do that? When we talk about DEIB is for everyone, we have to ensure that everyone understands that they have a place in this conversation around DEIB. I'm an executive coach. I work with a lot of leaders across the board, all walks of life. And I can tell you how many times people have said to me in confidence, I don't feel like there's a place for me in DEI. I don't think I belong in those trainings and those conversations. And moreover, sometimes when I participate, I feel like I'm being shamed or blamed for things that are outside of my control. And I realize that it may be hard to hear that. It's hard for me sometimes to hear that too, because I know how much history societally we have behind all of this. And at the same time, we are not going to be able to move this work forward unless everyone is a part of this conversation, particularly those who are in decision-making roles, which are often not filled by those who are in underrepresented groups. We need everyone to get on board with this, because the reality is if we can get DEIB right, and we help everyone understand that everyone has a role to play, and ultimately everyone will benefit if we get it right, that's what negates that zero-sum thinking. Because if we do get this right, then there's going to be more opportunities to go around for everybody. So we have to draw people into the conversation. We also need to focus on intersectionality. So we all have so many intersectional identities within us. I talked about gender and ethnicity, where a lot of this work often focuses. We're not even always considering the intersection of those two dimensions of identity, in addition to the so many other dimensions that we all carry within us. And as we are continuing to evolve this work, we need to be more mindful and inclusive of that. Gen Z is about to become one of the largest percentages of our workforce than they have been. By 2030, they're going to be about 34% of the workforce. So even from a generational standpoint, we are about to be more diverse than we have ever been. We have to take all these nuances of intersectionality into account. We also have to meet people where they are on their journey. So, as I mentioned, I'm a coach. Talking Talent, we're a coaching-led organization. And one of the core tenets of coaching is meet people where they are without judgment. As much as I wish and we wish that everybody just got it. They got why this work is important, they support it, they're behind it. That is not where everybody is on their journey. We have to take the time to meet people where they are so we can bring everyone along. And then the second piece of this, to fix DEIB, you have to fix the culture. One of the key ways to do this is to equip and empower leaders with the skills that they need to be able to cultivate a culture that fosters belonging. So another thing that I hear really commonly from our clients and prospective clients who we work with is once people make it to that manager level and they're leading teams, they don't necessarily know how to be good people leaders. They've been really strong technically, which is why they've gotten to where they are in their careers. But then there's almost a skills gap for many. For some, it may come intuitively, but not for everyone. So how can we expect managers to create this culture when they maybe have never even been taught how to do so? So the onus is on us as organizational leaders to be able to help them close that gap by giving them the right skills, by giving them the coaching to be able to do so. I actually have a few clients who implemented mandatory inclusive leadership and allyship training for their leaders, for their people managers. And I know the word mandatory is always controversial because we never, it's always that fine line between forcing somebody to do something and then having people kind of balk at it. And at the same time, if you don't make it mandatory, how many of us know it's not likely to get done, right? So that's why, that's the approach that they took. And even if not everybody was on board, it got their leaders speaking the same language. And it gave people a safe space to be able to talk about what some of their challenges were. I used to facilitate those sessions on Zoom, and inevitably, every time I wrapped up a workshop, there would be 2 or 3 people hanging out on the call afterwards for a few minutes because they wanted to talk about challenges they were facing or situations they were dealing with. Our managers are hungry for the support to know how to be more effective leaders of diverse teams. We just need to equip and empower them. We also want to cultivate a sense of belonging by embedding it into the employee life cycle. So how many people here are total nerds about the employee life cycle like me? Okay, I see a few hands go up. So I love the life cycle because it really is about thinking about every single stage that an employee interacts with our organizations, from the point of attraction when they're even thinking about coming to work for us. And so the reason that it's so important is because we don't want DEIB to be a one and done. Here, come join our ERG group, come take this training. We want it to be part of every touch point that the employee has with our organizations. And lastly, cultivating a culture of growth and not shame. I'm sure y'all have heard have a growth mindset. Well, when we're translating that to DEIB work, it's really about letting people know it's okay to make mistakes. Again, I've heard way too many people say to me, I get it, I want to lean more into this work, but I'm so afraid of saying the wrong thing. I'm afraid of offending somebody, so it's just easier if I don't say anything at all. And that is not how we're going to get where we need to go. We need people to be brave and to lean into this work. But the way we do that is by creating a culture where it's okay for them to make mistakes and to help people realize it's not about the mistake. It's about how you recover from that mistake, how you learn from that mistake and acknowledge it. That is what makes it okay, and that we can give each other grace so that we can all learn. So what's at risk? What's at stake if we don't change our approach to this? The headwinds are only going to get stronger. Our underrepresented groups are almost feeling like now they're the ones who are being targeted again. Not that it ever really stopped, but there's a lot of feelings of finger pointing that's going on because we're kind of still stuck in this old way and trying to find new ways of doing this. The resistance around investments in this work and those budgets getting cut, that's happening. Cultural erosion, where if we continue to have this polarization that exists, then it's only going to continue to pull us further apart. I would like to invite you all, many of you have notebooks in front of you, if you can just take a minute and think about what risk you feel exists currently in your organization around this work. Just take a minute and write it down. Really think about what's at risk. If we don't get this right, what's at stake here for your organization, for your employees? Just take a few seconds, go ahead and write it down. All right. So now I want to invite you all to imagine. Like I said, we're going to reimagine. So I want you to imagine belonging and what it can be, and I'm going to show you a short video.
Imagine walking into a space with the confidence that you are understood, even if it's uncomfortable or challenging. A space to be and feel open and achieve your goals, where every individual is more than a set of labels. Imagine being in a place where you are guided to understand yourself more and more, where you unlock your limitations to grow. Imagine a business that celebrates its own individuality as well as yours, where there is an openness, a willingness to ignite growth, development and change, reaching every corner, every department, and every team. Imagine this business is where you work, where you are surrounded by people who know how to navigate the hurdles and sensitivities that make being human so deeply complex, where you are guided to transform and thrive individually and as a collective, where all perspectives are voiced and heard. Imagine feeling connected and limitless, being in a place where your story can unfold. Imagine belonging.
All right, so I hope that video made you feel inspired. And another thing that I want to ask you to consider before we leave here today is, what is one thing you feel inspired to do as you leave here? What's one action that you can take as you go back to your organizations that you could do to help create this change that we've been talking about? We have a booth outside. Come see me. I would love to hear what actions you're thinking about, you're inspired to take. Would love to talk to you about that. And I'll leave you here with this quote by Mae Jemison, who was the first Black woman to travel into space. And by the way, lives in Houston, Texas. I was reading about her and I realized that. So Texan, like us. What she said is, the really wonderful thing that happened to me when I was in space was this feeling of belonging to the entire universe. Thank you all so much for your time today. I look forward to meeting you outside.